if I clean my condenser, well, first of all, let's go back. If I'm running through at 100 miles an hour, I cannot pick up the heat. So therefore, by the time I get back to my compressor, I'm still cold. I'm too cold. So my superheat's low. Okay, I clean the condenser. I drop my head pressure down, I drop my suction pressure down, and now that refrigerant's just rolling through my evaporator coil and it's absorbing the heat as it goes through there. So now when I go back out to my condenser, I'm a cool gas going back out to my condenser. Okay, instead of it not flash gassing and boiling. If that refrigerant can't boil, and the heat inside the evaporator coil is what actually makes that refrigerant boil, right? If you can't pick up the heat because it runs too fast, it don't boil. So then it's still a liquid going back to the compressor, right? Oh, that makes sense. Okay. Now, what if you have low indoor airflow? What does low indoor airflow mean? Anything that makes the airflow go through the system at a slow pace. Not enough grills opened up. Restriction of airflow any kind of way. Dampers aren't opening up. Transitions are too small. Blower running backwards. Blower too small. Lower wheel too small. Dirty evaporator coils. Transitions where the insulation falls off and blocks it off. Return air transitions are too small. Return air chases are too small. Anything that restricts airflow through the system. So when you read this and it says low indoor airflow, it has a litany of things it means, right? Low airflow also could be dirty evaporator coil, couldn't it? Okay? So if it's a dirty evaporator coil, a fixed metering device will give you a low suction pressure, a normal to low head pressure on a fixed metering device, which means a piston. It gives you a low superheat, gives you a normal to high subcooling because it's getting too cool in that condenser, so it cools it or normal, too cold or normal. Compressor amps are normally normal to low with a dirty evaporator coil. Dirty evaporator coil, again, is low indoor airflow. Okay? If you have low indoor airflow, that makes the supply temperature coming out of your vent too cold. If it's too cold, that makes your delta T too high. So instead of a 20 degree delta T, it's 28 degrees, 26 degrees, 25 degrees. Increase the blower speed. That's what the slide chart's going to tell you. No. Find out what's causing it to be too low to begin with, which is normally going to be something restricting it. Every once in a while you'll come across one that you have the blower speed is wrong set. Okay? Alright. Mild refrigerant restrictions. Now the difference between a mild refrigerant restriction and a major refrigerant restriction are enormous. Okay? You go put a gauge on the system is turned off and your pressures are equalized, high and low side are equalized. Let's just say in this case I have a major restriction in my dryer on my high side line. Now watch how this works. You turn that system on, and when you turn it on, I have a restriction in my high side line in the dryer. Okay? My head pressure, because my system is off right now, my pressures are equal. As soon as you turn that system on, that refrigerant tries to get out of the system, it can't get out. You got your gauge sitting there on the port, right? You're reading the pressure of that gauge. So all of a sudden that refrigerant is sucking through the suction line, compressing through the compressor, building up in the condenser, right? Trying to get through the dryer, and some's getting through the dryer, but not all of it's getting through the dryer. So it's going to jack your head pressure skyrocketing, right? You're going to watch your head pressure and watch your suction pressure, and your suction pressure is going to come down because the refrigerant's not getting through the dryer, and your head pressure is going to go skyrocketing, right?
You pump it down.
It's almost like you're pumping it down. But you're getting some refrigerant through there. Now what's going to happen on the other side of the dryer? It's going to start getting cold. Okay, why is it getting cold? Because now your dryer is acting like a metering device. Just like the pin here, whereas you have a piston with a hole in it that drops your pressure on the other side, because it drops in pressure, it makes it colder. Pressures and temperatures coordinate together, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, your dryer is acting like a piston. It restricts the refrigerant through the system, and it makes the other side of the dryer, which is your liquid line, you see your liquid line sweating. Anytime you walk up to a condenser and your liquid line is sweating, you have a restriction. Anytime. Anytime. Okay? Something is making that refrigerant flash gas and drop pressure. Okay? Most of the time it's because it's trash in the dryer itself. I'll give you, for instance, it is so hard to find, but unless you understand the refrigeration cycle and how it actually works, you will never find this problem. Okay? I get to a system, put the gauges on the system, I'm checking my superheat and I'm checking my subcooling, and I'm looking and I'm going, man, I got a low suction pressure, I got a low head pressure, I got a high superheat, and a low subcooling. What's that telling you? Low head, low suction, high superheat. I'm not getting enough refrigerant through this system, right? Mm-hmm. So what do? I go grab the refrigerant out the tank, right, out my truck. It's low on refrigerant, right? Everything's telling me it's low on refrigerant. Low subcoolant, high superheat, low head pressure, low suction pressure. I start adding refrigerant to the system. Keep doing, watching my head pressure, watching my suction pressure, and I'm like, man, it's not changing. What's going on here? Keep adding refrigerant to it. I'm like, something is not right here, but I keep adding refrigerant to the system, and it's not really doing anything. It's not increasing my suction pressure hardly at all, not increasing my head pressure hardly at all, but it keeps running though. And I feel over the condenser, and I don't have real hot air coming out of my condenser either. And I'm like, man, I am adding refrigerant to the system. The heat's not coming out of the condenser. My head pressure's not coming up. My suction pressure's not coming up. What is going on here, right? So what do? Keep adding a little bit of refrigerant in it, going, if I keep adding refrigerant in it, that head pressure's got to come up. The suction pressure's going to have to come up. I don't know where this refrigerant's going, but it's going to have to come up eventually. So I keep adding it, and all of a sudden I hear, what's happening? What happened?
Blew a gasket.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
What happened?
There's an internal overload inside the compressor. When you build up too much pressure inside that condenser, the internal overload inside the compressor opens up. It's a relief valve inside the compressor. It's a safety feature. So if I would have had a gauge in the inside of the condenser as opposed to outside of the condenser, I would be reading the pressures inside of the condenser, right? When you put your gauge on the system, you do not read the pressures inside the condenser. You only read the pressures outside of the condenser, okay? There are no ports inside the condenser to read these pressures. So in this case, I keep adding refrigerant into the system, and I have no clue. There is a restriction before my gauge. Can't read it. If you can't read it, can you tell what it is? The only thing that was giving it away a little bit is my subcooling before it got to my gauge was really high, okay? And it was really high, and then my condenser was not blowing out any warm air because the refrigerant inside the condenser was so backed up that it wasn't getting hot because it wasn't picking up any heat from anywhere, right? So my condenser's blowing kind of cool air out of it. Really weird. So I'm like, I don't know what is going on here. And then when I heard that noise, that triggered it. I said, okay, there's too much refrigerant in this system. And if you ever pump down a system that's got a really long line set, and as you're pumping it down, and all of a sudden you hear, and then your pressures equalize out. You didn't blow the unit up. Okay? You didn't blow the unit up. It's okay. All you have to do then is open your high side back again. Refrigerant will go back through the system and it'll start running again. Then you can start pumping that system back down again, and you have to kind of watch it to see where it was before. Then you can shut your low side before it blows up on you like that. Okay? Not blows up. You're not blowing up. The relief valve opens up. Then you can shut your low side and trap as much refrigerant inside your condenser as you possibly can. Then you can recover the rest of the refrigerant. What's another way you can pump more refrigerant into the condenser? How about if you go take a hose and you hose the condenser and take the heat out of the condenser? So if you take the heat out of the condenser, you cool the refrigerant, right? So instead of having a hot condenser, you have a cold condenser and it holds more refrigerant in it.
Oh, wow.
You may be able to pump it down quicker, okay? What if you are recovering refrigerant out of the system? Always, if you have an empty tank, what do? You pull a vacuum on that tank, because you can't put refrigerant in a refrigerant tank and a recovery tank unless you pull a vacuum on it to begin with, because you can't have air in that line, right? And you can't just put refrigerant into a recovery tank and go, well, I'll just open up the gas line and let the air out of it. Yeah, right. Now you get non-condensables in the system. So anytime you're recovering system recovering refrigerant out of a system, you pull a vacuum on your recovery tank, you bleed all of your lines through your recovery machine all the way over to your tank. You bleed everything, get all the air out of your system. You open up your gauges to your recovery tank, to your recovery machine, open up your recovery machine, let it go through your recovery machine right to your tank. So just pressure is pushing to your tank. Now that you have all the pressure pushing to your tank and you bled it all, because you gotta let all the air out of it, now just open that tank up and let natural pressure. Now, will you open high side and low side in order to recover it through? No, what you do is you open high side first. Why? Because it's liquid. So you're going to suck in most of the liquid first. So that natural pressure pushing through the recovery machine into the tank, and the tank is in a negative pressure, it's going to be sucking in. Well, if you only open the liquid side, you're going to suck in mostly liquid first, right? Mm-hmm. Now when you go turn the recovery machine on, you're mostly sucking out gas, and it reduces your recovery time. Make sense? Yeah. How about if you take your recovery tank and, to get extreme, you put it in a bucket of ice water. Your recovery tank is cold, low pressure. Pressures will run from high to low anytime, right? So when you're running a recovery machine, it's actually condensing all of that refrigerant, making it hot. So you're pumping in a hot liquid into your recovery tank, and it makes your tank hot, right? Well, you can run a hose over your tank and cool your tank down, and you can get more refrigerant in it. You can put it in a bucket of water, and it will cool that refrigerant off, and you can add more refrigerant into that system. Okay, so these are little tricks of the trade. Okay? Get back to your pressures and stuff here real quick. What if you have a mild refrigerant restriction? So we just told you about let's go back to that condenser before I get into that. So how did I find what was going on with that system? When I heard the noise of the valves opening up inside the system, I knew there was too much refrigerant inside the system. And I knew there was because I was dumping a whole bunch in it to begin with, so I knew there was a bunch in there anyway, right? Where was it going to? Now, how am I going to go read all this stuff now? So where is my restriction at? How am I going to find it? So what I had to do, guys, is I had to recover all the refrigerant in the system, okay? And it's hard to recover all the refrigerant in the system if there's a restriction on your high side not allowing it to come back out. It's hard to do that. It takes a while, okay? So I recovered all the refrigerant in the system. I cut the high side line inside the condenser. So I cut the hot gas line, okay? And I put a T in there, a Schrader valve pin, and then I went ahead and I put my gauge inside there, and I tapped my gauge inside there, okay? So now I'm reading the high side of that system inside the condenser coming right out of the compressor, okay? So watch this. If you've got a compressor and you got the high side coming out, and as it comes out, it goes through your condenser coils, right? And then it comes out of your condenser, and here's your service valve here, and then boom, here's where you normally put your gauge set on, right here, right? Well, I went ahead and I cut this line, and I put a T in this line, and I put my gauge right there, right out my high side, my hot gas line. If you ever touch a hot gas line, you're going to understand why they call it a hot gas line. Okay? Now, on a normal operating system, if my head pressure, on a normal operating system, if my head pressure is 350 pounds right here, what is my head pressure here? 350 pounds. But wait a minute. That's a hot gas line. You can burn yourself on that one. You can't burn yourself on this one. How is it 350 here and 350 there? What's the answer to your question?
The coil cooled it down.
Because the coil is subcooling the refrigerant from a hot gas to a warm liquid. So the 350 converts over to a saturation temperature, right? So you have high superheated gas in your condenser. The cool air running through your condenser coils and coming up and being dispersed out is cooling the coils so that now when the refrigerant comes out, it may be 10 degrees cooler, 12 degrees cooler. But does that mean your pressure changed? Pressure's still the same. So when I put my gauge on the system and I am looking for a 350 pound head pressure, this was an old R22 system years ago when this happened, probably, I don't know, 20 years ago, okay? So I was looking for about a 225 pound head pressure in the inside. So when I turn that system on, gauge runs down to the bottom, I watch my head pressure and it goes 500-600 pounds of pressure in it. Now I know why I got a restriction in my condenser. Where is it though? Well, I'm coming out my hot gas line here. So if I'm coming out of my hot gas line, does that mean I have a restriction here? 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 What if there's a bullet dryer right here? Is my restriction here? Is my restriction here? Where's my restriction now? Can I find it because I've got my gauge sitting here? How do you find it?
It's gotta be, I'd say the bullet dryer.
Yeah.
You gotta look for something, right?
Yeah.
How are you gonna tell what it is? You take temperature differentials.
Okay.
So wherever there's a temperature differential,
This will be high.
it's going to drop in temperature. So if I've got a higher pressure here than I have here, my restriction's in my dryer. In this particular case, it did not have a bullet dryer in it. My restriction was actually in my service valve. There was trash in my service valve. So what I had to do was, and I figured it out that, it was in my service valve. So I literally cut the service valve out of the system, opened it up, started banging it on the concrete and everything, and metal was coming out of it. So metal chips were coming from my compressor and restricted my service valve.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was there most of the day. But how do you find that, guys? Unless you understand superheat and subcooling, and unless you understand temperature differentials and drops, when it drops in pressure and it drops in temperature, there's your restriction. Okay? So if you got a high side line, and there's your condenser, and you got a high side line, comes up your wall, goes over to your evaporator coil, and then comes back down over again into your compressor, okay? So this is your high side, this is your low side line, you have a dryer on the system, you have it coming up here, and there's a kink in your line right here on the high side line. Watch this, guys. Here's a kink, and that's on your high side line. And I'm going to make this up because it never happens. The high side line was run through the wall, through the top plate, and somebody grabbed the line or they kicked it because they were doing something in the attic and they kicked it and they pulled that high side line and it went through the top plate right here and it hit on that piece of metal and that line was like this. Now it went like this and it kinked the high side line. Right? So you charging the system up, are you going to get a high subcooling or a low subcooling?
I would say high.
You're going to get a high subcooling because you're going to keep putting refrigerant in the system. The refrigerant is going to come over here and it's going to get restricted here, okay? So your head pressure is going to go high, your subcooling is going to go high. What's going to happen to your suction pressure?
It's gonna go down.
It's going to go down. What's going to happen to your superheat?
It's gonna go down.
It's going to go high
High up.
because you don't have enough refrigerant running through your evaporator coil. Okay? Now, how can you tell where these restrictions are? You're outside, got your gauges on the condenser on the outside. Your liquid line's cool, right? It's not freezing up or anything, right? And you're going, man, my head pressure's normal. My suction pressure, let's just say it's not completely kinked, but it's kinked. It's restricting refrigerant through. I'm looking at my suction pressure. My suction pressure is kind of low. My head pressure is not extremely high, but my subcooling is real high. So instead of running a 10-degree subcooling, I'm running a 20-degree subcooling, 22-degree subcooling. So I'm going, man, well, my suction pressure is 100 pounds. I needed 118 is what I'm looking for, but my subcooling is 22. Well, if my subcooling is 22 and it's supposed to be 12, is my system overcharged or undercharged, guys? If my subcooling is 22 and it's supposed to be 12, and I've got an expansion valve system, is my system overcharged or undercharged?
It's undercharged. What is it supposed to be?
It's supposed to be 12, but it's 22.
Then it's overcharged.
Then it's overcharged, right? But if my superheat's real high and my suction pressure is low, then is it overcharged or undercharged?
50 degrees. That's a low charge.
Okay, so which one is it now? Is it overcharged or undercharged? In this case, it's perfectly charged. And it's giving me a high subcoolant and a high superheat because it's restricting refrigerant through the system. Okay? So it's neither low on refrigerant or too much refrigerant.
Okay.
So you have to be able to decipher these things. Okay? So you have to first determine, is it a TXV system or a piston? It's a TXV. I know that. I see the valve on the outside of the system. Okay. What's my subcoolant? 22, right? What should be my subcoolant in this case? 12. We already determined that, right? So you go back to your gauges and you go, I have a 100-pound suction pressure. I have a head pressure that looks normal. I'm going to call it 325 pounds, okay? But I got a 100-pound suction pressure. My superheat's high. But darn, I got a normal head pressure, but my subcoolant's 22. Do I take refrigerant out of the system to bring my subcoolant back down to 12? Because that's what it's supposed to be. And if it's 22, that chart tells you if you have 22-degree subcooling and it's supposed to be 12, it tells you it's overcharged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't the arrow point to overcharge? Head pressure high, subcoolant's high, right? Mm-hmm. So if you look at the chart, you read it and you go, it's got to be overcharged. Got a 22-degree subcooling. No. If you know what I told you the other day? If it don't fit every category, it's not it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So in this case, it's neither one of those. I got a perfectly weighed in system. Somebody kinked that line after the fact and nobody knew about it. So system starts running a week or so later, boom, it got kinked, they call up, freeze them up. And what are you going to do? You're going to go out there, you put your gauges on the system, your head pressure looks normal, your suction pressure is low, your superheat's high, and then you don't check your subcoolant. That's what normal people do, right? They don't check their subcoolant because they don't know how to measure it to begin with, right? So what are you going to do, Adam? What are you going to do before you learned all this?
Oh, what do we do before I learned all this? I'm going to take some Freon out. I'm going to recover some Freon.
Well, if you got there and your suction pressure is low and, and your superheat's high and your head pressure is normal,
then I'm going to think, I'm low on Freon.
Okay, so what are you going to do?
I'm going to add something.
All right, so Adam's going to go put refrigerant in the system. So since Adam don't check subcooling, at least he never did check subcooling.
I never did, but I do now.
So he's going to go put refrigerant in this system, and what's going to happen to the system? Is he going to get his suction pressure up where he wants it to be?
No.
It's possible. How is it possible? Because you're going to keep jacking refrigerant in the system, and you're going to drive your head pressure higher and higher and higher and higher. So now you're going to start forcing more refrigerant to the evaporator coil, which can force more refrigerant into your coil and bring your suction pressure up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of a 225-pound head pressure, you ran it to 325 pounds. Or instead of 325, you ran it to 445 pounds. You didn't even know that because you didn't put your high side gauge on, did you?
Yeah.
You just put your low side gauge on and seen it was 100 and you knew it should be 118 and you knew your suction line was cold, so you added refrigerant, right?
I've done that before, yes.
You've done that before. Okay? So now, does the house cool properly?
That's not going to.
Not going to. Why? because now you have too much refrigerant in the system. Okay, go to the overcharged chart right there. Okay, now remember, we had a perfectly working system that got kinked after the fact, right? So now this is real life stuff, guys, and again, I keep saying, if you don't understand how this stuff works, then you can't go any further in this business. And that's why you've got to understand superheat and subcooling, inside, outside, backwards, forward. And if you do not know how this stuff works, you will just be wandering in the wind in there, okay? So we had a perfectly charged system to begin with. You knew it was perfectly charged because in this case, we're going to say, since you work with your dad and your dad understands that stuff, he charged the system himself 3 weeks ago, okay? So dad charged it up, and you know dad knows what he's doing, okay? So it was weighed in. That's how you know it was charged properly, because dad only weighs this system, then you know it was charged perfectly. But dad doesn't understand superheat and subcooling, or at least he never taught you anyway. So you get the service call 3 weeks later, and you go out there and you got the system looks like low on refrigerant because your suction pressure is low, right? Now you start adding refrigerant to this system. You don't check your head pressure. You just keep adding refrigerant to the system to bring your suction pressure up. How is that going to affect your cooling capacity?
It's gonna bring it down.
It's going to bring it down because now you have way too much refrigerant in your system. Your condenser, your subcooling is 35 degrees now instead of 12 degrees what it should be. Your compressor's pumping. Your amperage is jumping up on your compressor. Your head pressure is really high in the system. You're going to get another call back, right? All right, man, suction pressure's fine on it. You ought to be fine. Next 2 days comes by, get another phone call. Still not cooling properly. Dad comes back out there with you now. And he says, Adam, did you charge your system up? Yes, sir. I put some more refrigerant. I came in, it was low on refrigerant. Did you check the superheat and subcooling? No, sir, I did not. Didn't I tell you to do that? Smack! All right? So, now he puts his gauges on the system. He's got a jacked up head pressure. Instead of 325, it's 450. And he's like, man, what are you trying to do to this system? You got a 450 pound head pressure. Your suction pressure now is 112. Your superheat on the system is about 16, 17, 18 degrees. But your subcooling is 35. So we got to now take refrigerant back out of the system so we can figure out what's going on with it. So you recover the refrigerant back out of the system. You bring your subcooling now. You're going to bring your subcooling now back down to 12 degrees, and when you bring it back down to 12 degrees, remember when you first got there, we just said it was 28, right? Well, it's 45 now when you get there. So when Dad recovers the refrigerant down to 12 degree subcooling, now he's going to find that suction pressure dropped down tremendously. The superheat went up. Subcooling came down to normal, and he's going to find he's going to find a high head pressure, which is now going to be normal to a little bit low because they don't have enough refrigerant in the system. He's going to find a low suction pressure and a high superheat. And he's going to know that equals a restriction in the line. Because if he keeps adding refrigerant in the system, the subcooling goes up, and he's already at 12 degrees and he don't want to increase his subcooling. But he knows he needs more refrigerant in the evaporator coil, right? And how can you get it in there? Well, he knows that something is restricting the refrigerant going through the system. So you got to be able to visualize, guys. You got to be able to visualize that refrigerant running through the system and what's stopping it. So he looks at his liquid line. He's taking the subcooling pressures down at the bottom, the temperatures down at the bottom, converting it from saturation temperature, doing his measurements, and he goes, I got a restriction somewhere. Checks the temperature on each side of the dryer. Same temperature on each side of the dryer. Restriction's not there. So he's going to go inside to the evaporator coil, and he's going to test the temperature of the liquid line by the evaporator coil. And he's going to find it's 10 degrees colder by the evaporator coil, right? Because your restriction was coming up here and then went all the way over to your evaporator coil, right? So if your restriction, your kink was right there, it's going to drop in pressure right here, and it's going to start making this liquid line cold. So you may go to that evaporator coil and see your liquid line sweating. If you see your liquid line sweating, there is a restriction before, okay? So you have to trace it back. If you come outside and it's not sweating here, you go inside, it's sweating in here. Somewhere between here and here, you got a restriction. Okay? Now, let's look at another fact. Okay, so here's your low side line. Okay? Here's your compressor again. We're going to call this your high side, and then we'll call this one your low side. Whoop, I put 4. Low side. So now we're going to make a kink right there. How many times you put new construction, you got the copper coming out of the wall, the concrete guys come behind you, grab that copper line, pull up on it, and kink the suction line, right? That's why you always use a bender, so that you bend the refrigerant line straight. So when the cement guys come behind you, they can work underneath it. You never leave the copper running down to the bottom, because that concrete guy is definitely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, he's going to grab that copper line and he's going to pull right on up on it. He is not going to try to bend it. He is going to yank it right up, and right at the brick it's going to bend and kink. Okay? So now I got a problem in my suction line right here. There's my kink. Got a TXV system, guys. Perfectly charged system. Okay? I'm telling you it's perfectly charged. I weighed it in. Alright? But we went ahead and kinked the refrigerant line now, or restricted the refrigerant line in some kind of way, shape, or form. What's going to happen to my head pressure? It's going to get lower. Low head pressure. Now wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense, Eric. You told me right here, when this kink was here, I had a high head pressure, right? Boom. High head pressure here. That's on my liquid line, right? High side line. This is my low side line. Well, then this one's going to give me a low head pressure when my kink is in my suction line. Does that make any sense?
I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Okay, well let me wrap your head around it real quick. If my kink is here, and I got a gauge sitting right here, and I'm reading my high side right here, and let's just say it's 350 pounds. If I get a restriction right by my gauge, then as soon as that refrigerant comes out, and let's just say I got a shutoff valve there, so I can simulate a restriction, okay? So I go ahead and I kink it down, and I restrict it, my head pressure right away. As soon as I start restricting it down, we go skyrocketing it up, right? I open it back up, boom, head pressure comes back down, right? Okay. Let's go ahead and let's put another restriction over here. So we're going to open this valve back up. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to manually shut this one down. What's going to happen to my head pressure? It's going to start going up, right? Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let the refrigerant go all the way through the system. I'm going to let it convert into the evaporator coil. I'm going to let it go from a 3/8 line into a 7/8 line. And I'm going to let it come 45, 50 feet all the way back here. And I'm going to put a restriction back here now. So what's going to happen with that system?
That's what it is. It's going through the evaporator now. So
you've got a bigger line set. You got a 7/8. So all the points I've made so far, if it don't fit in every category, then it's not that. Well, that particular chart only tells you overcharged. Well, if it's overcharged and it don't fit in that chart, it's not overcharged. Okay? So if I've got a real high heat load, like my gas furnace is working, at the same time my air conditioning is working, then I'm going to have a real high suction pressure. I'm going to have a high superheat because there's too much heat running over that evaporator coil, right? And I don't care if it's a piston or a TXV. It's not going to maintain a constant superheat if I'm running 150 degree air over it. It's going to be a high superheat. The valve is going to be wide open. Your suction pressure is going to be jacked up high. And I don't care if your system is low on refrigerant, too much refrigerant in it, it's going to have a high superheat. Okay? Because when you run your gas furnace, that's what's going to cause it. You're going to feel your suction line, and your suction line is going to be hot. You're running a gas furnace over it, putting 100,000 BTUs into it. It's going to be hot. So you'll be able to feel that suction line on the outside. You will be able to tell that that's your problem by checking your superheat. Okay? If a system's low on refrigerant, do you have a high superheat?
Yeah.
Yes. What if you have a TXB that's slightly undercharged?
You're not gonna see it.
You're not going to see it
You're
because
gonna
it
get
maintains a constant superheat. Okay? So, what happens if, let's think about this, put your thinking cap on this one, guys, because this one will throw you off and you will be the fourth technician to go out and try to figure out this problem for this customer. And if you can't figure this out, they will have to call technician number 5. Okay? A vertical air handler in the closet. Okay? And it's also return grill is right there in the hallway. So you can walk up to it. It's very easily to diagnose this particular system. In this scenario, again, you're going to be the third or fourth technician going out there, and the customer cannot understand why her energy bill is $400 a month. It's a 1,200 square foot house. She's got a 2.5 ton air conditioning system, a 10 kW heat system, a 14 SEER system. It's fairly new. Why is my energy bill $400 a month? My neighbor's bill is $78. Okay? So you go out there, guys, and you put your gauges on the system. And you're running a 325 pound head pressure, 118 pound suction pressure. You're running a 12 degree subcoolant and a 15 degree superheat.
Everything's beautiful.
Everything's beautiful. And it just does not cool during the middle of the day. At nighttime it cools fine. Tell me what's wrong. It's a vertical air handler in the closet.
The heat load again.
Okay? So we're going to go check heat load now. Okay? Where's the first part we're going to go check on the heat load? Where are we going? It's a vertical air handler in the
Going
closet.
right to the return, right to the.
Okay, so I'm going to walk right over there. I'm going to open the door to the air handler. I'm going to look at it, right? What am I looking for? You just said a high heat load, right?
Put dust around the
Okay?
thing. I'm looking for any kind of openings, anything where,
Okay.
where I can
Think
suck
about
in
this now.
air.
If I got a high heat load, would my suction pressure be proper? And would my superheat be proper? And would my subcoolant be proper?
No, it wouldn't.
Okay, so that can't be the problem then, right?
No.
You thought you did so good on
I know
that.
I was getting there.
Okay, well let's think about a high heat load for a second. I'm going to look inside my return because it's not cooling in the middle of the day, right? So I'm going to stick my light inside the return and I'm actually going to see that I have no return air leaks in this scenario. I have no return air leaks in that vertical air handler. Okay? Why?
And I have a good delta T.
Oh, what? I got to go check my delta T. Hang on one second.
There we go.
I got a 14 degree delta T.
That's not good enough. You got a problem with your supply.
Okay. What kind of problems do I have with my supply?
You might have a hole in it. You might have.
Okay, if I have a
you might not
hole.
be connected to it correctly.
Okay, if I have a hole in my ductwork, okay, so I've got an air handler, right? I got a vertical evaporator coil, I got a blower motor right here, boom. From there, I got heating elements inside here, I got a supply plenum, I got ductwork, boom, boom. This duct comes out to my box right here, this duct comes out to my box here, this duct comes out to my box here, and there you go. I got 4 ducts all the way in my house, right? Got a return air below here, I got a return grill sitting here, airflow's going in here, it's 75 degrees going in here, coming out of here, 14 degrees is going to give me 61 degrees coming out of my supply, right? Okay. In this particular scenario here, guys, I have no leaks in my return air. None. The vertical system completely sealed up. You said, well, hey, you got a 14 degree delta T. You got a break in this line right here blowing air out right here. So there's air going. What about these? Should my delta T be fine over here now?
No,
No,
gotta check.
because your airflow's it's off.
No, the delta T might be fine over there, right?
Okay, well I'm telling you it's 61, 61, 61, and 61 for argument's sake.
All right. Well, and you saying
Except
that
this one here, it's going to be a very, very, very low airflow, but I'm still going to be 61 because whatever is still here, I have a positive pressure in here, right?
Oh, so it's pushing out.
It's
not
pushing out, it's pushing air out, but I'm still 61. 14 degree delta T. What's my problem? Return air sealed.
What about your hole in your supply?
Here, a hole here.
Mm-hmm.
Am I- am I
Yeah,
supply
but
side?
you still got your positive.
You
I
still
still got positive. I'm shooting air out on a positive. Okay.
boxes not sealed.
Well, my boxes are not sealed, so I'm shooting air in the attic a little bit.
But everything's
Okay.
still 61
Yeah,
degrees, so
still
that's not
61 coming out. Still got. So what?
One of your.
What is my objective right now? Okay. In this case, I got a 325 pound head pressure, right? I got a 118 pound suction pressure. I got a 12 degree subcooling, and I got a 15 degree superheat, right? My pressures are absolutely freaking perfect right now, guys.
That's because everything's happening. It's those heater coils. One of them stuck on.
Yeah. So I don't have to call another technician?
No,
Why don't I have to call another technician?
because
Because my delta T gave it away.
yeah.
Okay? The 3 technicians before then never checked the delta T. So what happens is, and he gets a gold star for this heating element is heating up. This one's not. I got one 5 kW heat system, and let me tell you what gave it away. Man, tell me what kind of problems you have. It doesn't cool in the middle of the day. My airflow coming out of my vent just doesn't feel like it's that, that cold. It used to be, but it don't feel like it's that cold anymore. And my energy bill is $400. What does that tell you? Something's driving the energy bill up. Well, how about 20 amps right here is driving the energy bill up? Non-stop 20 amps driving the energy bill up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay? Keeps heating the air up, so it makes the air conditioner run all the time. So the air conditioner draws 15 amps, plus you got another 20 amps, you're drawing 35 amps all the time. You got a $400 energy bill. I had a customer of ours that this exact same thing happened to. We put a new system in, and about 3 years later, she called back and she's like, such and such guy came out here and he said it was this, that, or the other thing. So when I went out there, and she goes, my energy bill is so high, it's ridiculous. And I'm like, your energy bill, I'm talking to her on the phone, I'm like, your energy bill should not be high. You got a 16-0 2-stage system, variable speed blower motor, blah, 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 blah. And I get out there and she showed me her energy bill. It's no reason. She's in a condo. 3-ton system. No reason it should be $400. So now I go check pressures, head pressure, suction pressure, superheat, subcooling, check all that, perfect. Delta T, 12, 14 degrees. I said, I know what's wrong. Open the system up, check my amperage on the system. Sure enough, I got one 5 kW heating system running at the same time the air conditioner's running. Been running like that for a year. 2 to 3 other technicians, maybe one guy kept going back over there. So here's what happens. You go out there and you go, Eric, I can't figure out why my system doesn't cool. And you don't give me all the information. Okay? So if you don't give me all the information because you don't go look at everything, I'm going to diagnose it wrong for you because I don't have all the information. Did you check your delta T? And you go, well, in this case, my superheat, my subcool, and everything's perfect, right? But if you're telling me, well, my superheat's off, okay? My superheat's too high. It's running 24, and it's supposed to be running 12. Well, tell me why. What's going on, okay? Give me more details. Look at this system. See how it's installed. All this kind of stuff. I can only diagnose with the answers that you give me. So I actually have a form that I want you to carry in your truck with you too. Because this form, if you fill out all the paperwork on this form, every number on it, you will answer your own questions 95% of the time. So before you call me, just like if you call a technician for technical support at Lennox or Root or whatever may be the case, he's going to go, what's your head pressure, suction pressure, superheat, and subcooling, and delta T? Matter of fact, they're recorded before you even get them. Before the technician comes on, please make sure you have model number, serial number, head pressure, suction pressure, superheat, and subcooling. Okay? So if you don't give me the model number of the indoor unit, the model number of your evaporator coil, the model number of your condenser, sometimes I'm going to assume that you actually went and looked to see it. I should never assume that you're actually going to go look to see that something's proper, right? I should never assume that you're going to do that.
I should either.
So here's the case. You got a 3-ton condenser and a 2-ton evaporator coil. Or you have you got a 2-ton evaporator coil and a 3-ton condenser. And you go, Eric, I can't figure out what's going on with the system. Well, I'm assuming you done checked to make sure that the model numbers are proper. They're not. You got a 2-ton coil and a 3-ton condenser. And you go, man, the superheat is high on this thing, and my suction pressure is low on it. My subcoolant, I got my subcoolant right, but I can't get my pressures right. How can I get my suction pressure up? Well, Adam, man, if your superheat, watch what I'm saying. If your superheat is high when it's supposed to be low, and your suction pressure is low, you got a restricted TXV. Go change your TXV, right?
Yeah.
So you go buy another TXV. You go put another TXV in. You call me up, you get in, you go, Eric, I put another TXV in. Same thing, man. I got my head pressure's high, my subcoolant's high, so I lowered my refrigerant into the system. I made my subcoolant proper. I put a new TXV in. I pulled a vacuum on the system. I made sure when I soldered the system in, everything's fine. I changed the dryer on the system. Same thing. Low suction pressure, high superheat. I'm not getting refrigerant through this system. I can't figure out why. I'm assuming you have a 3-ton coil because you told me you had a 3-ton condenser, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming you have a 3-ton coil.
All
Did
they
you
did
look
was
at it?
lower the blower speed.
No. You got the wrong coil.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You got the wrong coil.
Okay.
So I got 3 tons of air running over a 2-ton coil. Okay, it ain't gonna work. Not only that, but the coil you got is a 2417, RCF 2417. Watch this, the furnace you have is an R801 SA 075 417 MSA. What kind of furnace you got?
It's 80%. It's
Keep going, 80%. R801
you said it so fast.
075
That's 75,000 BTU.
417,
It's a 4-ton.
17 inches
inch.
wide.
Yeah.
What size coil did I say you had?
17 inch.
What size coil did I say you had?
Oh, 2-ton.
RCF 2417, right?
Yeah.
What size condenser did I say you had?
3-ton.
So now, did you lower the blower speed on the furnace when you installed it, or whoever installed it? We didn't even install it. But Joe Blow installed it. He grabbed the wrong coil. He's got a 2417 coil. He's got a 3-ton condenser. He's got a furnace that naturally blows 1600 CFMs of airflow because it's a 417 to force for 1600 CFMs. He's got 1600 CFMs of airflow running over a 2-ton evaporator coil with a 3-ton condenser trying to push refrigerant through that coil.
That can happen.
So I'm going to say, Adam, did you check your model numbers and serial numbers off of the system? And you go, well, no. I'm just checking my superheat and subcoolant. I haven't got around to doing all that yet.
Oh.
So that's the first thing.
Well, I tell you what, Adam. What kind of condenser you got? I got an RA1636, okay? What kind of coil you got? RCF 2417. What kind of furnace you got? R801 TA 075 417. So tell me what's wrong with your system, Adam. I don't know, that's why I'm calling you. Okay? Tell me what model numbers you have. Understand what your model numbers mean, right? That's why I keep harping on this, correct? So understand what you're doing. Understand the equipment that you're putting in. Now, if you go to a train system, are you going to know those model numbers? No, you're not. Okay? Should you know the model numbers that you sell and work with on a daily basis? Yes, you should. Okay? So the more I keep sticking this in your head to understand these model numbers, then when you come to these problems, they're not a problem.
Yeah.
They're somebody else's problem. You got the solution for them. okay? So what do you do now in this particular system? Now you gotta go get an RCF 3617. Probably that 3617 is gonna fit right in that 2417 cabinet, right? And you change the door on it, and you put the correct coil in it, because it's probably gonna fit right in there physical size-wise, right? Then you lower the blower speed down to it's a 3-ton system, then you go pull the vacuum pressure tester system, charge it up, and now your system works perfectly fine. Okay? So, there is a lot more, there is a lot more to these charts than just looking at a chart and going, oh, well, it's gotta be this. Oh, it's gotta be that, okay? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because when you're looking at these systems and you're looking at the charts, you gotta go check the rest of the system. You gotta go check to see that your return air. I went to a system the other day, I think I told you all about this. The system the other day was a 5-ton system, okay? And it was in the right-hand corner of the house, towards the back right-hand corner. So if I drew the house a little bit here, would probably do this. Okay? So this side right here is pretty much master bedroom, master bath, laundry room, bathroom, master bath, master bedroom, living room, a kitchen right here, kitchen, dining, living room area here, and then back here you had bedroom, bath, and bedroom. Return air was right here, 20 by 20 return air. 5-ton system.
Too small return.
Okay? Oh, wait. I didn't tell you about the 24 by 24 return air right here, right? And there was I think there was about a 14-inch duct that went over here. Now, I got a 20 by 20, and I got a 24 by 24. Do I have enough return air for a 5-ton system?
You do.
You do, if it's installed properly.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not installed properly.
It's not.
Now,
That's too long of a run.
If there is a 24 by 24 with a 14-inch hole, how big is my return grow really?
14 inches.
A 14-inch hole, isn't it? Okay, I would be better off, and you would be better off, let's put a 16 SEER system in and redo your ductwork instead of the 25 SEER system, right? So, you have a budget when I come to your home. You know what your budget is. I have no clue what your budget is. When I go through all the systems and I look at your ductwork and I look at this and I look at that, I'm going to find where your budget is to make it work properly. I don't care if I sell you a 14 SEER builder's model system. I don't care. I don't care if I sell you an XC25 with zoning and filtration systems and UV lights and this, that, and every bell and whistle known to mankind. I will sell you every bit of it if that's what you want for your house.
But you're gonna do it right.
But I'm also going to tell you, okay, here's the reason you're purchasing a dehumidifier in your house, a zoning system in your house, a filtration system in your house. If this is what you want for your home, sir, here's what I can do for you. Here's the price on it, and if you want to do it, that's fine and dandy. If you go look at the air conditions in my house, and if you had to pay somebody to do the air conditions in my house, you would probably end up spending about $60,000, $65,000 for all the air conditioning that I have in my home. I have a 4-ton system and a 2-ton system. And you would probably end up spending about $65,000 by the time you're doing everything that I did. Everything in my house is all hard pipe. It's all custom-made ductwork that I made myself here in the shop. I've got a geothermal system downstairs, so you're digging 250-foot wells to run the water lines into the earth. So I've got I got zoning systems on each one of my systems. I got dehumidifier in the attic. I've got filtration systems. I got everything. Now the normal person is not going to want to spend that kind of money to air condition their house, right?